समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है, अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है, अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
आप समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Senior newspaper editors in Bangladesh, whose offices were torched by violent mobs, are saying that their country is entering an era of murder. This as Russia calls for a de-escalation of tensions between India and Bangladesh, invoking the 1971 war that birthed the creation of Bangladesh. And this as a massive protest break out outside of the Bangladesh High Commission in the national capital, Delhi. How should India respond at a time when the parliamentary panel led by Shashi Tharoor has also flagged the involvement of Pakistan and China and said that they are countries fishing in the proverbial troubled waters? I'm Barkha, you're with the Moncho story. On the program today, we look at how India should respond to its Bangladesh challenge, a challenge described by India's parliamentary panel to be the biggest strategic challenge since the 1971 war between India and Pakistan. The parliamentary panel report clearly talks about the dangers of Pakistan and China's interests in the trouble in Bangladesh, a trouble that the panel report argues is being used against India. Of course, there is the issue of minorities being targeted in Bangladesh. Today, Sheikh Hasina, who continues to be in India, has released an audio statement standing in solidarity with Deepu Chandra Das, the Hindu Bangladeshi who was lynched to death. Tensions between India and Bangladesh are soaring. There are anti-India protests in Bangladesh, and there are anti-Bangladesh protests today in major cities across India, including at the Bangladesh High Commission in the national capital. There is a visa freeze and an impasse between both countries. Mehfooz Anam, one of Bangladesh's best-known editors, described the situation as his offices were among those torched to be an era of murder for his country. How should India respond to this growing security challenge? Let me introduce our very distinguished panel of experts as we try and look calmly but clearly at what is unfolding in our neighboring country. Joining me now is Meenakshi Ganguly, who is with the Human Rights Watch. And in fact, Bangladesh is one of the countries that she particularly looks at. Thank you, Meenakshi, for being with us. Also joining us is veteran diplomat Ambassador Bhashwati Mukherjee, always a pleasure, ma'am. Also with us, military veteran General Raj Shukla. Welcome to the program. And for a Bangladeshi perspective, though every Bangladeshi on this program has had their own individual perspective, there isn't one monolith Bangladeshi view, is Dr. Mubashir Hassan, a political scientist and analyst. Thank you very much for all of you. I want to start actually by playing out a small clip of Mehfooz Anam. Mehfooz Anam was no fan of Sheikh Hasina. He was, in fact, a critic. When Hasina was ousted, he believed that there were new beginnings for the country, for his country in that moment. And today, his offices are among those that have been torched. He described the experience to be one where he said that the mobs that came wanted to not just burn the buildings in which they worked, but to kill them. He called it an era of murder. Take a look.
They didn't only want to burn the building, they wanted to murder the staff of Delhi Star. So we have entered, এটা ফখরুল ভাই খুব সুন্দরভাবে বললেন, যে we have not only to just react, stand together, but we have to respond. We have entered into an era of murder. মত প্রকাশ তো অনেক দূর হয়ে গেছে, এখন বেঁচে থাকার অধিকারের ব্যাপারে সে আপনারা এখানে, আপনাদের সঙ্গে আমরা আছি, আমাদের সঙ্গে আপনারা থাকবেন। ধন্যবাদ।
So, Ambassador Mukherjee, if I may start with you, how should India respond? We have seen mass protests at the Bangladesh High Commission today. We've also seen security agencies ensuring protection to the Bangladesh High Commission, stopping the crowds before they could breach any part of the complex. The immediate trigger for these protests is, of course, the lynching of Dipu Chandra Das, a Hindu Bangladeshi. Sheikh Hasina has spoken in an audio statement. I'll be playing that out later in the program, saying she stands with the family of Dipu Chandra Das. My question is, in the range of options for India, how would you advise the government to respond at this moment?
Well, Barkha, thank you for having me in your program. It is important for us to continue protesting outside the Bangladesh High Commission in Delhi and wherever they have a diplomatic presence in India, while ensuring the security of the premises of and their personnel, because that is our duty as their host country. Whether they ensure the security of our premises or not, it's for them to reflect upon. If they do not secure the safety of our diplomats and our diplomatic premises, we will have no option but to shut down our consulates, reduce our staff, reduce our diplomatic presence, and insist that they do the same. That's the first point. Second, we must step up diplomatic pressure on Bangladesh through the countries which matter, not just the Russians, and we are very grateful for their statement. We need to tell the Americans and we need to speak to the Chinese. Both have enormous influence, sometimes conflicting, sometimes conjoined, but they have influence. We have to tell them that if Bangladesh continues in this manner, for instance, the lynching of this young man, treating him worse than an animal, with such cruelty and without any sense of justice or proportion, and being dragged from a police station to be lynched, tied to a tree, and then his torso burnt. That is something that will enrage public opinion throughout India, at which point of time it may not be possible for the government of India or state governments to ensure the safety of Bangladeshi individuals wandering around alone. If they make the atmosphere so poisonous, if it's so toxic, then the Bangladeshi government has to understand that they are endangering the security of their nationals who may be here for medical treatment or for business purposes, etc. It works both ways. Secondly, we have to make it very clear to the interim regime that we look for free and fair elections. We look to have a good and stable relationship. But if they continue to threaten us in this manner, if they try to talk about the chicken neck or taking our territory or teaching us a lesson, we have many ways of teaching them a lesson. The first lesson we can teach them, Barkha, is to cut off their electricity. And secondly, when the river treaty comes up for renewal in early 2026, we don't renew it. That doesn't mean going to war. That means putting pressure. And some pressure will have to be put first through countries which matter to Bangladesh, which includes us, by the way. They seem to forget that. And they also seem to forget that if we really want to cut off the electricity, even Mr. Muhammad Yunus will be without electricity. And these are the options that we should explore to begin with before going on to other options, while reassuring them that we want to have peaceful relations with them. We were responsible for their creation, though they seem to have very short memories. We saved them from the genocide of the Pakistani army, and now they want to bring genocide to us. So we have no other option, Barkha, but to go tough. Start with a softer, tough options and move up the scale until they understand who and what they're dealing with, Barkha.
Now, that was a very, very specific and pointed and sharp opening remark from Ambassador Mukherjee. Let me bring in, before I come to General Shukla and Meenakshi Ganguly, a perspective from Bangladesh with Dr. Mubashir Hassan. It's also important to say that Mubashir, that all the people from Bangladesh we've been talking to for the last few days have had very, very different and distinct responses. They've ranged all the way from Jamaat supporters to far-right supporters to those who till yesterday were arguing on my program that Indians should understand that while there is a strong anti-India sentiment, that sentiment is also being used to punish a section of the people of Bangladesh who do not agree with what's happening today. And in fact, people have pointed us towards a survey done by one of the leading papers that was in fact torched by the mobs, where a majority of people of Bangladesh did not agree with the exclusion of the Awami League from the upcoming elections. So would it be fair to say that not everybody is on board in Bangladesh with what's happening in the country today? How do you see it, sir?
Yes, Barkha, that's absolutely right, what you just said. It is a fact that there is anti-Indian sentiment on ground here, and that anti-Indian sentiment is tied up with how India is perceived to support Sheikh Hasina during her regime. But what is happening now is that sense of anti-Indianism is kind of fanned by a group of people who have tied within the government itself. It seems to us there is some sort of encouragement to right-wing and far-right elements of the society within the UNS's government, which is absolutely deplorable. And you know what they're doing is they are terming anyone as anti-Indian to suppress freedom, or freedom of speech, or liberal views and liberal values. These two newspapers, Prothom Alo and Daily Star, has been staunch critic of Sheikh Hasina's government. They publish series of reports unearthing her corruption, her human rights violation, and so forth. So where it needs to be seen as that wider people do not actually support this sort of violence and antagonism. And look, India is the biggest neighbor of Bangladesh, and so Bangladesh and India needs to come into an agreement where people contact would be much more cordial.
But Mubashir, how is that possible in these circumstances where our cross-party parliamentary panel has just submitted a report, and I'll take this to General Shukla and I'll come back to you, where Pakistan and China have been named. Ambassador Mukherjee was saying, good on Russia to call this out, but we need to talk to the Americans, we need to talk to the Chinese. The Shashi Tharoor-led parliamentary panel report actually says that Pakistan definitely, but China also to a degree, is involved in this turmoil. There is another perspective. I had another senior diplomat on this program yesterday, who said that he believes the Americans were also involved in the regime change when it came to Hasina. So to that extent, there seems to be a very real security dimension to this, General Shukla, especially when you join the dots with Asim Munir and later the ISI chief warning that the next threat to India would come from the east. When you look at the fact that Osman Hadi, the anti-India student leader who was killed, leading to these mass protests, used to talk about a greater Bangladesh, and try to include our states of the Northeast. So how do you see it?
So while, Barkha, there are a whole lot of local instabilities and chaos, and events in Bangladesh are particularly worrisome. They don't surprise me at all. They shouldn't surprise you. On your show, we've discussed this, I think, a couple of times over the last 5 to 6 months. And I mean, I clearly see insidious statecraft at play from external factors. And one of them is certainly ISI. The DG ISI's travel to Bangladesh, Turkish involvement, money, wherewithal. For quite some time, the drug syndicates coming out of Myanmar, Rohingya, Deep Haldar has been writing about it, Rami Desai have been writing about it. So there are certainly larger forces at play. It is just my inference that there was a China hand. The snub that Sheikh Hasina got when she visited Beijing, and for very different set of reasons, it is the Americans also. I mean, it's not very wise to offer advice, but let me just tell the, shall we say, the Bangladeshi intellectual class that why are they allowing themselves to be manipulated by external forces? That is really something that should worry us at all. And while we have been pointing to the Jamaat and the ISI, the far right in Bangladesh, which is this Hizb ut-Tahrir and the Al-Qaeda in the Indian subcontinent, AQIS, they have also been pretty active. I mean, there have been a number of articles, commentaries to say that the far right has been talking of using the Bangladeshi military to bring about, a political transformation. So it is just not this ISI connect with the Jamaat. It is these far right forces, Turkish money and wherewithal, which is creating these instabilities, and these instabilities are also posing a threat to India. And if this instability and chaos is not contained, my military hunch tells me you will soon have a terror attack from Bangladeshi territory. The Jaish is already enlarging its footprint there. Asim Munir has openly said so. And now if there is a terror attack, from our eastern horizons, it complicates our statecraft greatly. See what's happening on the West. This whole 27th Amendment, the revival of the Jaish, tells me that the nuclear terror complex is being strengthened in Pakistan to challenge the Modi doctrine. And the Modi doctrine is that if you inflict terror upon us, we will react kinetically. And if I'm sitting in Pakistan, the way strategic military minds operate, why should I launch a terror attack from the West? Why not from the East? So I'm saying these are very dangerous times. Sane people on both sides must take stock, and the Bangladeshi establishment must not allow any external manipulation, especially from the point of statecraft, because that will have very dangerous consequences. And this is not a time to say so. Just 30 seconds. Apart from all the shall we say, the issues that Ambassador Baswati raised, there are other options too. So, I mean, India is a country of great strategic military heft. I don't wish to sound threatening, but if Hindu minorities are lynched, if there is a terror attack from the East, it will greatly complicate matters and vitiate the whole national security spectrum.
So it's a grim picture you paint, but you do say that, wiser counsel on both sides can and should prevail. Should, yes. Can it? And I think, Meenakshi, if I can bring you in here, it's unclear who's in control right now in Bangladesh. Is the interim Yunus government in control of the street? Dr. Mubashir says that there's even encouragement to some of these elements on the street from elements within the government. And to that extent, when you look at this through a human rights lens, you see religious minorities being targeted. We've seen cultural institutions where, tablas and harmoniums have been carried off by violent mobs. And you've seen Mahfouz Anam, one of the most respected media people of South Asia, talk about how the mobs came to kill them. And his country is in era of murder. And he was not a Sheikh Hasina fan. He was a critic. His newspaper did many, many pieces against Sheikh Hasina. Sorry, General Shukla, you have a finger up before Meenakshi responds.
Brief interjection. The editor who's on your screen, I recall categorically that when Sheikh Hasina was overthrown, he came on a program and he was, shall we say, very welcoming of the change.
That's what I'm saying.
I mean, look what mobocracies do. So there will never be an end to this. So I'm saying sane forces on both sides should intervene. The state should take control and make sure that this chaos does not spill over into India in form of some terror attack. That will be hugely dangerous.
Okay, let me bring in Meenakshi. Meenakshi, go ahead.
Thank you, Barkha. I would agree with the general that we need sane voices. There is a crisis in political leadership in Bangladesh right now. Dr. Yunus has not been able to provide the kind of calming leadership that was needed after 15 years of Sheikh Hasina's extremely authoritarian rule. Let us not forget that Sheikh Hasina's government was committing extrajudicial killings and enforced disappearances. And therefore, what happened was that we have now reached a point where Bangladeshis were angry with Hasina, but that has now been a year and a half. And by this time, the reforms should have come in. The end of reprisal politics should have come in. Instead, what we find is a situation where there are extremist forces that are coming in and occupying a political vacuum that Dr. Yunus has left without being able to control his country and take charge of his country. I do want to say some more things, just because I think we forget, and the ambassador raised this, we forget India's role in how Bangladesh came about, the millions of refugees that turned up before the war ended, and the fact that India protected that community, and how that is how they got involved in the freedom movement, and that lies in the root of why Pakistan continues to despise India. It is because there was a secession of their country when Bangladesh became independent. So we Bangladeshis tend to have to remember this. Perhaps they forget. The other thing I want to flag is that, as Mubashir said, India is the big country. For the longest time, India was the example of democracy and diversity in the region. Let's not forget there are more Muslims in India than there are in either Pakistan or in Bangladesh. That was the country that India was. But India itself, there are two things that happened, which these extremist groups are using to fan the mobs in Bangladesh today. One is the treatment of minorities. It's terrible what happened to Mr. Dash and how he was killed. But don't forget, there have been similar images coming from India that these groups are now using, saying, oh, look, that's what they do to their Muslims. Let's go after the Hindus. And that is really something that needs strong leadership from India to sort of counter this in the strongest way by addressing minority rights. And the second thing is Sheikh Hasina's role. India seemed to be protecting Sheikh Hasina, and I will absolutely say that Sheikh Hasina cannot be returned to Bangladesh. This is not a situation where any responsible government will return a leader who's going to be lynched or hanged or she's already had a home burned. So, but again, that needs strong political statements from Indian government to explain that there is no way, there is no international law that will allow Sheikh Hasina to be returned to Bangladesh, considering the situation in Bangladesh today. And of course, there is the election coming up. One really needs the international community to weigh in very strongly to ensure that there is a full, fair, participatory election, which Bangladesh has not had for 3 consecutive elections. There should be a proper election, and India should, and the world should not have to deal with Dr. Yunus, however, Nobel laureate that he is. He's not a politician. He's not a political leader. We need an elected government that India can do business with, and all of this would hopefully then be resolved.
Okay, but the election is taking place with the exclusion of the Awami League. That is important to note here. So you have a large political entity that isn't even being allowed to take part in the election. Before I come back to Ambassador Mukherjee, since we're talking about Sheikh Hasina, she continues, as Meenakshi said, to be in India. A number of Bangladeshis have come on this program and said, why is she in India? The fact is, with this absolute sort of anarchy in Bangladesh, as Meenakshi said, no country would send back somebody who came here, by the way, facilitated by the Bangladesh military. It is important to remember that when Sheikh Hasina came to India, fleeing the violence, it was not, presumed to be a permanent situation at that time. However, this is how it's played out. Sheikh Hasina has given a rare audio statement. She's been giving written interviews. She doesn't speak that often in the public. But she spoke with the family of, Deepu Chandra Das, the Hindu man who was lynched in Bangladesh. And a section of that interview has been released as a statement where she's saying, as long as I am alive, I will stand with the rights of people like Mr. Das. Let's listen in, and I'll come right back to Ambassador Mukherjee.
যে দীপক দাস তাকে মিথ্যা অপবাদ দিয়ে নবীজি সম্পর্কে নাকি কটূক্তি করেছে, তার কোনো আজ পর্যন্ত কোনো দৃষ্টান্ত দেখাতে পারলো না, কোনো প্রমাণ দেখাতে পারলো না, কিন্তু তাকে ধরে এমন ভাবে অত্যাচার করলো, এমন ভাবে মারলো, শুধু পিটিয়ে পিটিয়ে মারলো তাই না, পা বেঁধে রেখে আবার আগুন দিয়ে পোড়ালো। এরা কি মানুষ? ওদের চেহারাটা মানুষ দেখলো যে এরা কত বিভৎস, কত জঘন্য, কত নোংরামি। কোথার দিকে এই দানবরা আসছে বাংলাদেশে, কাদেরকে খাওয়া পড়া মানুষ করলাম, সেটি আমার এখন চিন্তা। খুবই কষ্টদায়ক। আমার সান্ত্বনা দেওয়ার ভাষা নাই, কিন্তু আমরা বুঝি, আর কেউ বুঝি না বুঝলে আমি বুঝি। স্বজন হারা বেদনা, আর বাবার সামনে ছেলে আর বাবা ছেলের লাশ উঠাবে, এটা তো কোনো বাবা চায় না, কোনো বাবা চায় না। আপনি ধৈর্য ধরেন, আর কি বলবো। আসি, বেঁচে যখন গেছি, যত দূরেই থেকে আমি আসি আপনাদের সাথে, আপনাদের পাশেই আছি, আর এর বিচার হবে ইনশাল্লাহ। এটুকু খালি ধৈর্য ধরেন, বিচার হবে।
So she says, as long as I live, in the end, she says, as long as I live, I will stand with you, and inshallah, you will get justice. Now, Ambassador Mukherjee, this issue of being perceived to be pro-Hasina, the fact that Hasina continues to be in India, the parliamentary panel that submitted their report, they also said it's important for India to keep reminding everybody that It's not like India is not facilitating her politics from here. We offered her safe refuge, and it's not that we're involved or interfering with the internal process of Bangladesh. But you will hear Bangladeshi guests who will come on the program and they'll say, the fact that she's there means you've taken a side. How should India respond to that?
Well, first of all, Barkha, as you rightly pointed out, her escape was facilitated by the Bangladeshi armed forces. And if you recall, when she first came to India, she was not supposed to be here permanently. She was supposed to move to a third country. And there was a lot of speculation. Would it be United Arab Emirates? Or would it be some country in the Middle East? Or would she go to London where she has her family there, etc.? But I can only surmise that those third countries refused to accommodate her, or it was considered to be dangerous that if she went to those third countries, they could possibly, under pressure from a Yunus regime, return her to Bangladesh. So she herself must have decided with her family that she was safest here. So we did not offer her permanent refuge here. It was her decision. Given the kind of condition, if we return her to Bangladesh, she will be possibly raped, tortured, and hung in public. No government, as you rightly pointed out, no responsible government could ever do that to a guest who has sought refuge. And in India, we have a long culture and civilization where somebody who seeks refuge in our house, we do not turn him or her over to a certain horrible, tortuous death. So, but there are ways in which we can explain this. We can also perhaps, though it's difficult maybe, request her to not to make so many public statements at a moment when the situation is so tenuous and so vitiated that any statement coming from her would only make things worse for the Hindu Bangladeshi citizens, I may add. They all have Bangladeshi passports. For them in Bangladesh, for their safety. Under those circumstances, it is important for us to explain that we are against the murder, torture of minorities in Bangladesh. That includes Sufis, that includes Christians, and misuse of this law by which somebody wants to settle a score with you and he is Muslim and he just has to say that you've said something against the Prophet Muhammad, etc. And that is something that is done routinely in Pakistan also. But one would never have thought that Bangladesh, with its original syncretic culture, would end up doing this. So it's a difficult decision, but this sentiment needs to be articulated and explained to all that the permanent refuge in India was not something that was that we offered. It was her decision because whether third parties refused to have her or they were considered it dangerous that she went there, they turned her over. That is her decision. That is not India's decision. But in the circumstances in which her motherland is, we cannot possibly turn her over at this point of time. If Bangladesh once again becomes a democracy based on rule of law, then she has herself said that she would like to return to Bangladesh. So this is something we need to explain. But I don't think that the lynching of this poor young man or the threats on Pratham Alo, as you rightly pointed out, which is not a pro Sheikh Hasina newspaper, these actually show that Bangladesh is descending into chaos, in which case there would be two options. One would be that the Bangladeshi army would take over. There would be a martial law, and the army would take over. Or they would, as General Shukla said, some people would orchestrate a massive terror attack, let's say in West Bengal, in 24 Parganas, in the border area. And we would be obliged. We would be obliged. We have no other, according to the Modi doctrine, according to what we have said publicly, we would be obliged to take measures in a considered, mature manner, that those measures would be hard measures, not soft measures. That is why I said that in the first instance, we should turn off their electricity supply. That will immediately bring them down to their senses, because it's not right now the climate there is okay, but it's difficult to live without electricity. Let's shut it off for
So let me bring in Mubashir. Mubashir, you said India is the larger country. Not all people of Bangladesh feel what is playing out on the streets right now. What would somebody like you, expect India to do at this point?
Look, first of all, I think to start with, it would be really nice, or at least objective, to understand Sheikh Hasina's legacy rationally. Most of the discussion in Indian television and print media starts with how Sheikh Hasina, it starts with the point from her seeking refugee, and that's fine. But why she had to seek refugee? What was her legacy? Why so many people are frustrated? That needs to be some sort of empathy from the Indian civil society side to understand it. That's number one. That would kind of build a bit more bridges. That's number one. Number two is this audio clip you played of Sheikh Hasina. That sounds very nice in phrase, but Bangladesh has a problem of persecuting minorities that goes even into Sheikh Hasina's period. We wrote an article in the Foreign Policy magazine. We've seen from 2013, 2014, 2017, 2019, mobs have been attacking in the villages and those areas. So it's a cultural problem. And it's not happening out of the vacuum, because there is a sense of impunity to the perpetrators that kind of expanded and took place under Yunus's government. And as I said,
what now, Mubashir? What now? What now? What can India do, given what's playing out? This is hardly the time when India can show, the kind of calm generosity that people like you might expect it to. Specifically, what do you think India can do? Briefly, because I want to go to General Shukla and Meenakshi.
Thank you. 3 points. Number one is that there needs to be much more public diplomatic engagement from India's side. There is not been taking place, and that's the place other countries are taking place, like General mentioned here. Number two, it would be really useful, and I agree with Ambassador Bhashwati Mukherjee, is that discouraging Hasina to speak and release a statement. Her other statement released from India are full of violence and threats and bullying. So that's number two. And number three is continue this diplomatic relationship, and hopefully there will be, when the Bangladesh goes to the election, is reestablish the relationship between political authority and Indian authority. I think that's the only way. So we are looking at 1.5 months of window at this moment.
And while all of these points are well taken, there is one essential problem of this upcoming election, which is that the Awami League is not being allowed to even take part in it. And therefore, I think, on your first 2 points, fair enough. On the third point, I don't know. Just, you have one sentence, because I want to bring in the general. One sentence there, Mubashir?
Yes, it will also depends on the amount of voter participation. If there's a large number of voter participation, over 50 to 60%, that itself would give an answer to your question.
But 69% people in Bangladesh are against excluding the Awami League altogether from...
Yes, but that's a sample, no, Barkha? That's
okay. I can only quote the data we have, Mubashir, as you know. But General Shukla, I want to come back to this security perspective, because Ambassador Mukherjee and you have both referenced it. Yesterday, too, we had experts on our program saying that the provocation by whoever, I don't know by who, maybe a combination of forces, seems to be to trigger some sort of new age conflict between India and Bangladesh. And therefore, you have a very different idea of a two-front, I don't want to say war, but a two-front conflict. And that may be the game plan afoot. Now, the point is, you said Sena Council must prevail on both sides. What should happen for Sena Council to prevail, General Shukla?
So, Barkha, I have 3 comments to make. One is, if Bangladesh has to choose a model of democracy between Pakistan and India, the central point is this: that our politics is also pretty turbulent, sometimes virulent, but there has always been a peaceful transition of power. And I think they are going down the wrong road when the BNP boycotts or you exclude the Awami League. That creates a very different kind of democracy, which in the long run is not productive at all. Look what happened to Imran Khan's one page. The hybrid regime now is gunning for Imran. So these things really don't work. But I mean, this is a larger point. The second issue that I would like to raise is that even after a change of government, I mean, now what it has been more than a year, what is this mobocracy? Why can't police forces and the army restore order? I mean, one incident and now Hindus will be lynched, and all this has to come to an end. Because if it doesn't come to an end, and no matter how you justify it, I just can't see how the Bangladesh army, the police together, along with whatever the interim government is, why can't they put an end to this? Because at the slightest pretext, you have burning down of media outlets, targeting of minorities.
What do you make of the relative diffidence of the Bangladesh military? We don't actually know how they might react if push comes to shove.
So every system is different. I do not have very deep insights, but I cannot understand how there can be such frequent breakdowns in law and order, and therefore I feel that, within the Bangladesh army, there are factions. One hears of General Wakar Zaman and the QMG, and they are inviting ISI infringement. We know how many times the DG ISI has traveled and a lot of people from Pakistan. Now, this is thoroughly unwise. The Bangladesh army must realize this. The second point I would like to make is that this is the time for us to step up our engagements with Bangladesh, diplomatic engagements, even military engagements. I hear that the two chiefs have a good rapport, General Upendra Dwivedi and General Wakar Zaman. We should strengthen these engagements, look what we can do by way of int exchanges, keep a tab on the terror links in a proactive manner. And the third point I wish to make, and these are a set of defensive military measures, there is no offensive poise in them. Just as we are so sensitive to our western borders, this is the time to seal the eastern borders too. Because it is not only, a terror attack, but this whole business of illegal immigration, infiltration with the ISI. There will be no point reacting after an attack. This is the time to seal the border. Have some kind of RR force raised for the eastern borders, because you have no answer. And, step up technological surveillance, drones. There are a host of measures that you can do, because the porosity of the border is also a big problem. But it's interesting. So those kind of measures are best taken now. And so that is one kind of issue. And one last point I would like to make is that, and this is divorced from Indo-Bangladesh relations, but a larger point. As India now is a fourth largest economy, third largest economy, look at countries like China and USA, how proactively they stabilize their peripheries. Now, we are not USA, so I'm not talking of a Monroe doctrine, but some kind of measures. And here I think the institution of the CDS and the DIA was raised with this purpose, to have intercross in the region, to shape the kind of forces, so that periodically you don't have these instabilities and we are suddenly reacting. So there are ways to do this. Some of them can't be stated on television. But this is a time for India to make sure that its regional periphery does not, plunge into such frequent chaos. And there are a number of steps that can be taken. And perhaps Bangladesh would want many of these steps if India is willing to exercise them. So these kind of measures will help to bring down temperatures.
And again, it's very interesting that you feel that at this point, actually, it's time for closer contacts. Military to military relations may actually help matters, because the Bangladesh military has not so far revealed any sort of political affiliation in this whole mess, at least not overtly. Meenakshi, given the upcoming election, we hear our Bangladeshi colleagues saying, look, you have to engage more publicly with our country. There are others like the Pakistanis who are there now frequently. Where is India? India did make some efforts. The foreign secretary, I think, has had several rounds of talks. But how does India respond to an election? Look at the precarious situation. Sheikh Hasina is here because either nobody else will have her, or, she feels the safest here. We don't know, as Ambassador Mukherjee said. Her party is being excluded from the election. Now, either the election, in any case, turns out to have such an overwhelming participation that the Awami League's exclusion becomes irrelevant, or we don't know the street rules, the mob rules. We simply don't know. So how should India respond to this upcoming election?
It is going to be a challenge, because one of the problems that happened with the previous elections is that India did not interfere. One of the things is that the past 3 elections, where the opposition was excluded, opposition members were locked up, one of the reasons why Bangladeshis are angry is because India did not at that point speak up when the elections were not free or fair. So for this time round, for India to speak will be a challenge. But I do feel that there needs to be an election. Once that election happens, anyway, likelihood was always that BNP would win if the 2024 elections had been held in a free and fair manner. It was likely after 15 years in governments change in all democracies, so it was likely that Tariq Rahman, the BNP would have won. Tariq Rahman is coming back to Bangladesh, I believe, Mubashir, tomorrow or the 25th.
Yeah.
I think this is the time for India to start conversations with the BNP. I will say that one of the reasons that there is such a severe problem is that these forces, these extremist forces that are using religious arguments to sort of mobilize the mob, wants to disrupt the election. Jamaat has never won elections in Bangladesh. So therefore it isn't, this kind of behavior that we are seeing now possibly is also in some ways trying to disrupt this election. BNP and Jamaat were once partners, but I think no longer are partners, are now competing with each other. So it is important to have this election. I agree with the general. If the situation arises where there cannot be a free and fair election, perhaps the military has a role to try and make sure that this election happens. We don't know. We do feel that there should be an election that is participatory and rights respecting. On the point of where are the police, the trouble is that in the 2024 protests, 1,400 people, according to the UN, were killed by police. So a lot of the police now are being prosecuted for those attacks. So the police is holding back. The military is under pressure as well, because a lot of these disappearances were conducted by these sort of the Rapid Action Battalion, by the DGFI, which we always joke DGFI wants to grow up and become ISI, is the military intelligence wing of the Bangladesh army, was also extremely disruptive. These groups are now, there are, I think, 15 soldiers, even some serving officers who are on trial right now for enforced disappearances. So what happens is the security forces are, having not performed their duty in a rights-respecting manner, having submitted to the Hasina government's diktats and abusive orders, are also now fearing that they might be prosecuted. So therefore, they're not coming forward to manage the law and order situation right now.
Okay, complete and total a mess, a minefield of a situation. Ambassador Mukherjee, I'll give you a 30-second closing remark. Can it be de-escalated? Can it still be de-escalated from an Indian perspective?
I think the way things are turning out, Barkha, it would be difficult to de-escalate it because, first of all, there is overt Pakistani involvement. Second of all, Yunus is not in control of the situation. Thirdly, Meenakshi has rightly pointed out the constraints upon the police and the armed forces. Under those circumstances, the question may arise on your next show: what should India do if Bangladesh disintegrates into anarchy? We will have to seal our border immediately. We cannot let in so many people from Bangladesh like last time when we had 10 million refugees and Sialda railway station was like a huge refugee camp, but we handled it. Situations have changed. We will have to seal the border. First and foremost, we have to secure our territory and our people and our country. That comes first. India comes first. It sounds heartless to say it, that if it descends into total anarchy and there are millions of refugees trying to cross over, we have to secure and seal our border. Secondly, de-escalation is not possible when every day there is a provocation. And I agree with our Bangladeshi colleague that even in the time of Sheikh Hasina, there were attacks on minorities, but it was not in this systematic manner. I still remember Durga Pujas were being shut down. On one occasion, the head of Ma Durga was chopped off. That was in Sheikh Hasina's time. But they were not orchestrated in this manner. There is a change in the pattern. And the pattern is to provoke India. So we should not get provoked. We should first secure our border and look at our own national security interests. But if there is a massive terrorist strike, we will have to do what it takes to make the Bangladeshis and the Pakistanis understand that we are not a banana republic. We can look after ourselves, by ourselves, in whatever way it takes. We're not going to discuss it on national television, but we will do what it takes to secure our land and our people. Because for us, India comes first. We have to secure ourselves. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador. We will leave it there. It is a very, very complex, messy, chaotic, and dangerous situation. There is a reason that a parliamentary report has called it India's biggest security challenge since 1971. And I don't want to make light of it, undermine it, or trivialize it in any manner with any sort of pithy conclusions. I think all of you have spoken from great depth of experience. So thank you for that. We leave it there. Thank you to Meenakshi, to General Shukla, to Dr. Mubashir, and to Ambassador Mukherjee. Thank you very much. We'll keep monitoring the situation in Bangladesh right here at the Mojo Story. So do keep watching and see you soon.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.